my friend Jared Strout, who I was very close with in high school, deserves a shout out here because, anyway, what this is,
I don't know what's coming now.
is a discussion of a life hack. It is one that I think our listeners ought to consider at least before rejecting. And it works like this. My friend Jared used to love in the winter. Now, mind you,
you were in LA.
We grew up in LA, so the winter was less brutal than
I don't know what's coming, but
well, Jared used to, after he had a car, he used to like to roll down all of the windows. He had a car with a sunroof, but it was a manual sunroof. And he used to vigorously open the manual sunroof and roll down all the windows. I think they might have been manual.
He manned it down.
He manned the windows down and the sunroof open and would drive around with the heat on, which was odd. Nobody did this.
The sunroof open?
Yeah.
Oh, I do this all the time in the winter.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. I will just say, without any further analysis, that it is actually quite the innovation. You don't think of it because, in general, what we do as moderns is we try to perfect the temperature of our environment so that we are comfortable, right?
And we try to be efficient in our use of resources.
Yes, although I would point out that the heat in your car is free, or very close to it.
So this is an important point. Explain that further.
So the point is that your car generates too much heat.
That this is ridiculously wasteful.
Even if it was wasteful, I'd still be an advocate for it.
Okay, but it's not nearly as wasteful, at least in a gas car.
Yeah, and that's true. The logic of this does invert a little bit in a electric car, but electric cars are so marvelously efficient anyway. But the point is
that the heat is just recovered from what is being generated by the engine.
Right, the engine is generating far too much heat for anybody's good all the time. Yep. And
even in LA.
Right, and in fact, back in the day when cars weren't quite so good, those of us who were a little adventure-y knew that if your car was in danger of overheating, if you were in the desert, for example, and it was very, very hot, and your car was showing, if the temperature gauge, which cars used to have, showed that you were in danger of boiling over and melting your head gasket and all sorts of terrible things that could happen to you, one of the remedies was you would turn the heat on.
You know, our producer has had like all of these things happen.
Well, of course he has. Yeah. He's a young man. He pushes limits, and he's blown out a head gasket or two.
Yeah, well, 2 cars on the same mountain.
That mountain is probably trying to tell you something. But in any case, the point is, it is not your instinct in a hot car in danger of overheating to turn the heat on, but it is exactly what you should do because it effectively adds a second radiator to the vehicle. It blows the heat into the car, which is not fun. But in the winter,
you might want to open your windows in that case.
Right, in that case, you definitely want to open your windows. But in the winter, opening your windows and your sunroof, if you've got one, and turning on the heat, just at the level of the experience, actually is quite interesting, right? It creates a kind of swirling mixture of hot and cold that is very invigorating. And anyway, it's something I've been doing for some time. Both our sons now engage in this behavior, and it let's put it this way. There was a time when all cars did not have air conditioners, right? They all had heaters for obvious reasons because the heat's generated automatically, but it used to be that air conditioners were an option. Now that air conditioners are effectively on every new car, at least in the US, people in general, if you watch people driving around, they almost always have their windows up. Right? You drive around in this sealed box and you get the temperature to be as you like it. And you do so without thinking about the possibility that you have a choice and that maybe what you actually want is a higher variance experience. In other words, are you more comfortable at a level of temperature consistency, or does the fact that you net out to a temperature that's comfortable, but it's in a swirling mass of warm and cold, air. And of course, if you have heated seats, you can add another element to this. You can, drive around with no heat coming in, a heated seat and the windows open. Anyway, it's something that gives you a lot more sense of your drive.
So I have two reasons that this is not all that appealing to me.
Yep.
One is that I have long hair.
Right.
And you talk about the swirling mass of cold and warm air. Well, your hair stays more or less in place, and you talk about it, showing signs of having been in such a car afterwards, but it never ends up restricting your vision or getting tangled into knots.
Right.
Yeah.
So our producer, who has not had a haircut in a long time, but does not have hair the length of mine, has something to say.
There's a combination of windows that you can have open that leaves your hair perfectly in place. But it may be front left and back right. You do have to. Whatever car.
So what Zach is saying?
It does not allow you to retain the hair that you walked into the car with, still having at the other end.
I'm not arguing.
The other second point is sound, is noise.
Well, I was going to get there.
And maybe if you're listening to music, you can just crank it up and you're not going to get some of the treble bits so much. But if you're listening to words, like I've been listening to a lot of audiobooks lately, it's going to be really tough to hear over the noise. Depending. Well, it also depends. Like, are you talking about at highway speed? Are you talking about 80 miles an hour?
Well, there's a lot of caveats that I haven't gotten to yet.
Yeah. Okay.
One is you have to think about the quality of your air. And frankly, I don't know.
You're outside the car.
Right. If you're on a highway, if you're on a freeway, right, you are in a corridor of a mixture of air and exhaust.
Totally.
How good for you is it to have the windows open? I don't know, because if your windows aren't open but your vents are open, it may be that you're breathing the same stuff, right? Or it may be that there's some rate at which your air in the car goes bad as you get on the highway. I don't know what those considerations are, but they're certainly worth thinking about. If you are on a lonely country road, it's a very different phenomenon. As far as sound goes, I think there's even a worse caveat. Not only does it get in the road from the point of view of listening to whatever you're listening to, but it may be a danger to your hearing.
It's really loud. If you're going fast, it's really loud, especially if the surface you're on isn't totally smooth.
Yep, and in part, it depends on your vehicle, right? A vehicle that is very well thought out with respect to turbulence near your ears may be a lot quieter with the windows open. A vehicle that isn't so well thought out, not so much. I will say from taking up motorcycle riding that the danger to one's hearing posed by wind noise is a big topic of discussion in the motorcycle world. And
helmets block some of that now?
Yep, and helmets vary tremendously in quality. One of the things that I think it's absolutely worth spending hundreds extra on a helmet for is one that blocks much higher quantity of the noise. But no helmet is thought to render it safe. And so the advice is that you wear earplugs.
In addition, so like those little foam.
The foam ones are lousy. There are better ones, but yes, that you're supposed to wear something. If you're going to be at highway speeds, you're supposed to wear something in addition to your helmet. And so I don't know that driving around with your windows open in the car is safe for your hearing. It's worth considering. I'd love to know if somebody has looked at the decibel levels. Undoubtedly, they have. But in any case, the point I want to make, though, is that we have defaulted into two things. We have defaulted into riding in closed cars. And there are lots of reasons to question that, right? It divorces you from the distance that you're traveling in a way that isn't obvious to you if you always have the windows closed.
When we were in Portland at the beginning of this summer, and summer came late, I began seeing, I think it was just a couple of people who had actual convertibles. Like there's a Miata, and I don't remember what the other one was, who were driving around with their convertibles as convertibles in like April. And there was a freak snowstorm in April. It was not convertible weather. And I so respected it. It's like, okay, you're feeling it. Here you are. And these weren't people on the highway. This is going around town, and it's pretty low noise. Low speed. It's always a risk, the Pacific Northwest, except for maybe in August, September, it might start pouring on you at any moment. But
well, it's more of a risk in a convertible. I will say that the more I do this, I do it in the winter, and one definitely has the sense of very chilly air, but you're not net chilly, right?
Well, there's a lot. I mean, I think maybe we'll come back to this. I think maybe your intention was to come back to this question of sort of thermoregulation.
Yep.
But cold plunges, cold showers, cold sleeping, all of these things where you shock your body into something that modernity has rendered us able to fully escape.
Yeah.
Most moderns never actually have to be shocked by cold anymore. And it's quite possible that being occasionally or even fairly regularly shocked by cold in a way that that you can get out of it safely may actually be extraordinarily good for you.
Yeah, this is kind of where I'm headed here, is that because our ancestors were, as Aaron Reich points out, stressed for resources, we have a built-in obsession with things like thermal comfort that results in us taking the variance out of our environments at a level that is probably not good for you, and the ways in which it may not be good for you are a little hard to define fully. And I would say one thing that is true is that I do have the sense that driving around with the heat on and the windows open gives you a sense of being alive. And I would say that in general, the sense of driving around with the windows closed is almost the opposite, right? You can drive and just almost not be cognizant that you're even doing it if you're on a familiar road. And that the question is, maybe there are psychological benefits to introducing thermal chaos into a otherwise mundane activity. And in any case, I think the upshot of all of this is, hey, you, whoever you are, this is a very cheap experiment. Are you overlooking something that would enhance your life? You could find out in a couple of drives, and it might be that it changes nothing about what you do, or it might be that it changes everything about what you do. And what do you have to lose?